A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, it is a period of fighting Nazis and fighting institutional racism, which are kind of the same thing. George Lucas puts his money where his mouth is and taps Anthony Hemingway, Aaron McGruder, and John Ridley to create a film about one of the most legendary groups of heroes the world has ever seen. The original Red Squadron, the Tuskegee Airmen. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are solely those of the speakers, and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. Additionally, this episode will contain discussions of systemic racism in both the military and the film industry, and touch briefly on sexual assault. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello there, and welcome back to 6 Degrees of Star Wars, the podcast where we explore all the ways that George Lucas's flagship franchise surrounds us, binds us, and penetrates us in the landscape of cinema. I'm your host, Sam Marchioni. Joining me today is Callie Castle.
Hey guys, good to be here.
And for the very first time, CB Smith of Taking a Page. Yay!
Whoa, good to be here, guys.
Today, in honor of Black History Month, our Degree 1 is Red Tails, the 2012 Lucasfilm movie that is about the Tuskegee Airmen. So, I vaguely knew about the Tuskegee Airmen. My first introduction to them, somewhat embarrassingly, is Night at the Museum Battle of the Smithsonian, where Craig Robinson plays one of them, and they salute Amelia Earhart, and it's a very small thing. So I did not do a lot of research into military history because I am not a dad. I
feel offended.
A few weeks back, my family and I went to see The Boys in the Boat, and I'm like, this is the daddest dad movie ever to dad, but Red Tails might come close for another daddest dad movie ever to dad. I'm not 100% sure how far it goes. War movies in general, I do not usually vibe with. I'm sure my little brother would have loved this because he is obsessed with all things planes, and I'm sure he could have told me every single detail about those goddamn planes. I'm like, I don't care. Just tell me which ones are the good guys and which ones are the Nazis, and I'm good to go.
Well, they made sure you knew that because they had scary German guy with the scar constantly pop up. I love that guy. He was great.
Gotta love having a scary German guy to make it very clear, bad guy, that guy's the bad guy.
It's effective and it works, so...
I'm sorry for offending you. There's nothing wrong with liking dad movies, but there is a genre.
I am the dad friend of the group, so, that was a personal attack at me, but it's fine, I forgive you, Sam.
You know, I've been asked so many times if I had kids, because I am very dad-like, that I probably would have, if I had a kid for every time someone asked me if I was a dad, I could probably afford to have my own... Don, I don't have a good joke for this. I'm sorry. Damn.
Your own one black coffee?
I would, well, to be the military, no, I would have my own platoon at this point.
All right, because you actually, Smith, you have served, or you are serving right now. I always forget.
Right, so I am still currently serving. I am a sergeant in my state's National Guard unit. I actually just got off of a job today. It's a lot. It's very fulfilling. And even though it's Army and this is Airmen, technically at this point in history, these guys are technically Army, but they branched off afterwards. So there's some things I can say, some things I can't say that I could bring some insight into, but that's why I did more historical research for this.
I'm sorry. Jokes about dads are different from dad jokes, but I want to make so many of them. This is a very good movie, I think, and it is interesting because I dove a little into the IMDb trivia, and apparently George Lucas had this in his brain starting from 1988, so that's a while for something to be cooking like this. He ended up having to finance it himself because there was no studio that was willing to take this level of risk on a majority black cast.
Yeah, and there were other Tuskegee Airmen movies, but the reason why I don't think many people really remember them is in part what you said, is that you have a majority black cast with black characters, and it is very much a Black story.
It's not history though, right? I had a hard time digging it up. I couldn't find like the names of the characters as actual things.
So you're right. Everyone in there is a fictional character. There's a couple who are based off of specific soldiers within the Tuskegee Airmen. But for the most part, it is all like typical historical movies. They take events that happened and like squish it down for time, as well as put scenarios that did happen in the wrong order chronologically.
I know I found one that I saw with Andre Brower. I probably mispronounced his name, but rest in peace, Andre.
Oh God, yes. That now I'm just sad.
Because I got it confused. I was like, wait, I don't see Andre in this film. Oh, that was a different one. That's why.
There are quite a few movies about the Tuskegee Airmen. Cuba Gooding Jr. and Terrence Howard, who were the big marquee name gets for this movie, have both been in other projects about them.
Mm-hmm.
Cuba was in the Tuskegee Airmen in 1995, and Terrence was in Hearts War. But it's kind of startling to see how many big names came out of this. David Oyelowo, who went on to acclaim as Ava DuVernay's Martin Luther King in Selma. Michael B. Jordan, we all know him now.
Leslie Odom Jr.
Yeah, and even the scriptwriter was see if I had his name. Darn, I forgot to add his name, but he was one of the writers for the Boondocks.
Aaron Magruder.
Yeah,
he
that's
and
it,
George
Aaron
Lucas
Magruder.
actually, they started out in a rather tenuous place because Aaron Magruder was one of the people who was not a fan of Jar Jar Binks for reasons of racial stereotyping. So, it's kind of nice that he and George Lucas met, and George was like, yeah, okay, do you want to come on and like help me make this movie about an important piece of Black history and do it right? And this is not a problem I have exclusively to this movie. A lot of movies like this, again, dad movies have this problem, like to reference The Boys in the Boat. I finished The Boys in the Boat, I'm like, I know absolutely none of these characters' names.
I was going to say the irony is that even though I am military, that has kind of ruined military movies for me. It's because like you can watch something and like there are so many things that are off. The recent movie with one of the Hemsworth with the horse soldiers, I believe is the book it was called, 12 Men, I think was the movie called.
I would know, I didn't see it.
So we're watching it, me and my unit, we had it in the office on, and I kind of went up to my lieutenant and I was like, hey sir, are they allergic to helmets? Like what's going on? and we just started nitpicking all the minor things, like no one has a water source even though they're out in the desert. No one's really going for cover during a fire. It's really bad.
I was wondering about like that during the flight scenes when so many times they have like their air masks off so that you can see their faces talking, and I'm like, are you allowed to do that?
I feel like you need oxygen.
That is an Air Force thing. Unfortunately, I'm not part of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It was helpful for them to have the masks off because then I could actually have some semblance of, okay, I know who you are. I'm not just looking at your eyes and trying to figure out who you are based on your skin tone.
Yeah, there's a lot of war movies do something like that. I know Band of Brothers, like they acknowledge the filmmakers acknowledge that they took the helmets off because it's like, listen, you need to know who the characters are, or you need to know who the actors are. You need to recognize them. So we're going to do stuff like that.
It's very similar to the Top Gun opening where Maverick rides his motorcycle without a helmet on the base, speeding at 1,000 miles an hour. When you would get in so much trouble for that and disobeying orders, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with MP. They're a whole other animal.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take your word for it. My brother's favorite movie is Top Gun, and that is one of the reasons he terrifies me.
My mother's is Maverick, so the sequel. I know.
I never actually seen a Top Gun movie.
You're not missing anything.
Well, judging from y'all talk about like dad movies, it sounds like something I would like. Do you want to start chronologically, or do you want me to give like a historical background a little bit?
Please educate us.
The start of the movie takes place in 1944 Italy with those the white fighters escorting a series of bombers, and they get distracted by German fighters, and they abandon their posts, leaving the bombers exposed, and you see the big, the death and destruction, everything. So then in comes the Tuskegee Airmen, getting angsty that all of their flying missions are non-combative or they're behind enemy lines. So all of their missions are very much routine and boring. So historically, at this point, you have the Tuskegee Airmen being what's considered the 332nd Fighter Group. Before that, they were the 99th Fighter Group before they got consolidated. At this point in history, in 1944, they actually had some combat experience in North Africa before the invasion into Italy. Prior to that, the fight to get Black people to be airmen. The beginning of the movie has a quote from the Army college study of 1922, I think it was. That is an actual study, and that's an actual real quote. And that, unfortunately,
Lovely.
yes. So the belief that Black soldiers are insufficient of being pilots. In the 1930s, you had aviation kind of slowly integrating racially. And you had a lot of push from both civil rights leaders as well as civilian Black aviation pilots. There's one particular stunt in 1939 where Chauncey Spencer and Dale White from Chicago, they bought a rickety old plane, and their idea was, we're going to take this plane and we're going to fly from Chicago to Washington, D.C. as a stunt, and to show the political leaders of the time, being like, hey, give us the opportunity to fly militarily and civilian. And ironically enough, they actually met up with Harry Truman back when he was a senator. And Truman would later, as vice president and then later president, be the one to racially integrate the military after World War II. And so historians kind of talked about, like, though this was like one of the moments, because he famously said, like, if you guys can fly in this rickety old plane that didn't even have like working brakes or anything, like, if you can fly this, yeah, if you can fly this, you can fly anywhere. I feel like that's a that's a kind of attitude I think works best for going into this movie, because as Black civilians and Black soldiers, unfortunately, like, they have to over achieve themselves in order just to get the same recognition as white soldiers. Like, my wife is Black, and when we talk about some of the stuff, it's very prominent about how, like, she needs to, like, overdo something when I can do, like, something kind of, half-ass. And that's something that is very much permeating throughout the movie. Anything else you want to add, or you want me to just keep going?
Well, I think you've given us like a good amount of background that we can now start talking about what actually happens in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we're following the two characters we'll call them by their call signs / nicknames. There's Easy and there's Lightning. I gravitated towards Lightning partially because I'm a sucker for David Oyelowo. I think he's a phenomenal actor. But also, unfortunately, Easy is played by Nate Parker, who has a more complicated legacy. In 1999, one of his classmates brought forth rape allegations against him and a fellow wrestling teammate, Jean McGianni Celestine. And Parker was acquitted, but there's controversy around it, and unfortunately in 2012 the accuser died by suicide. She tried to remain anonymous, but it's hard not to feel that there's pain in that situation. And because I'm not one of those people who can separate the art from the artist, it's hard to give Parker effective judgment on my end. And I'm also sorry if this is the first either of y'all are hearing it and suddenly you feel awkward if you liked Easy as a character.
That's thanks, because I did like Captain Easy as a character. Oh,
I'm
boy.
very sorry.
I didn't particularly care for him. I kept writing in my notes, stop fucking drinking. You're about to fly a fucking plane.
I mean, that is an unfortunate thing in the military.
It's also a very easy character beat to give somebody something to measure up against.
Oh, no, it made sense. It just infuriated me.
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. And allegedly Easy and Lightning, they're supposed to be parallels of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and I'm like, I really hope the King family
Yeah.
didn't hear about that, because I feel like they would be super mad at you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that was that was an odd comparison. Boy.
Like, even just personality wise, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that.
I never, like, I didn't know that going in. I just found that out about 2 seconds ago. And I never got that vibe. Like,
I do think it's a little funny that David Oyelowo is playing the Malcolm X personality-based one, and then he went on to play Martin Luther King.
yeah.
I will say something though about Lightning as a character, in that like they're trying to portray this character as like the hotshot pilot who makes all the risks, and like throughout the whole movie he does show to be like making the better choices up until the end. Unfortunately, something like that for a black regiment historically would not really fly. Pun intended.
He would have gotten his ass court-martialed.
He would have gotten, I want to say court-martial is a good, but he would be reprimanded a lot more than just Captain Easy just being like, hey, we're still going to go with your plan, but I don't really like it. So there are a lot of numerous instances in World War II of black regiments and black leaders being very, very harsh to their subordinates, in part because of what I mentioned before. Like, as a soldier, you are not just, and the Tuskegee Airmen, the real ones, have said this over and over, they aren't just fighting a war on the, in the European front. They're fighting a war back home to show, the people in power, like, hey, we can do this, right? And I think this beginning scene really, really exemplifies that. Captain Easy, he talks to Lightning because Lightning is saying his gauge is off for I think it was coolant or something. Now, I have been in one burning Humvee, and a convoy I was in, the Humvee in front of me also caught on fire, in large part because we did not pay attention to what's called PMCS, performance maintenance checks. So it's very important for just a Humvee. For a plane, I can't imagine that. And so something like that, like, I know he's supposed to be this kind of annoying officer, but that to me really like rings true to this idea of like you have to overachieve in order to show yourself, like that kind of attitude. And later on, when Lightning has this shootout with the train, and Captain Easy is saying like, well, here's this headline for you, dumb pilot, got himself killed. That kind of attitude to me like really, really exemplifies the kind of mentality for African American soldiers during that time period, is that they have to be this very strict, very rigid regiment.
A model minority.
Yeah, that was the attitude. If they ever make a movie called based off of what was called the Golden 13 of Navy officers who were black during this time period, that was the same thing. It's like they worked 3 times as hard as their white counterparts in order to achieve like half of the recognition.
And in fairness, I mean,
Well,
Lightning did point out that they had rickety planes that, those things went out on them all the time. So that was why the other guy flew under to check the coolant, to be like, well, he's not smoking.
Yeah. That's another unfortunate reality, is that African Americans usually got the secondhand materials. World War One, I remember a black regiment received Civil War uniforms instead of like modern day khakis.
Here, have a thing that's like I don't know, 50 years old. I'm sure there's not like still fleas in there or some shit.
It would have been 100. It would have been roughly 100 years, because the Civil War was in the 1860s, and we're in
Yeah, I mentioned it's World War One. I'm sorry for the confusion.
He said from World War One.
Oh, I misheard. I apologize.
It's all right. That was just a tidbit.
World War One doesn't really get the same attention as World War II, so easy mistake to make.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes even when they do World War One, it's still like, yeah, we're fighting Germans again, so we might as well just Nazi code the hell out of them.
I mean, they have an opportunity to have like a cameo of Corporal Hitler in their World War One movie, and I don't think I've ever seen one in a World War One movie.
I'm not sure anybody wants to touch that.
Well, I
but-
mean, have him as a cameo and just be like, "Oh, I know where that's gonna go." I'm just thinking in dad mode, like dads would love that. Be like, "Oh, he's gonna be in the sequel."
Oh yeah,
Not the
yeah. It's very
sequel.
Indiana Jones getting the book signed by Hitler thing. But
No.
that's the other thing. Lightning, more than anything else, he is the Han Solo, he's the Indiana Jones, and he got the one thing that Harrison Ford always wanted. He dies in the first movie.
Oh. I mean,
I'm
if you go
specifically
to the-
talking about Han Solo there.
But, I did notice that there was a lot of hurry up and wait, which I did appreciate. Like, that there's a reason that's the catchphrase of the military. It's hurry up and wait.
Yeah. There have been moments where I would wait out a whole day or an entire day of nothing happening, but I was there. I did my job. Wasted a lot of time, but hey, it happens.
You get there, you gotta wait, a zillion hours before nothing happens.
Happens a lot.
But sometimes that means you get to spend time with a very pretty Italian lady.
I mean, in the movie, yeah.
That plotline didn't do much for me. I was like, it was sweet and it was a nice distraction, but it didn't,
Well, unfortunately, I know enough about movies and post-Hays Code Hollywood to know that was probably what actually sealed Lightning's fate, because it is very difficult to have an on-screen relationship between a black man and a white woman that actually ends happily in a movie.
That, and also I think after Pearl Harbor, the idea of the military romance that unfortunately doesn't end well, I think that's kind of been a trope at this point. Pearl Harbor,
God,
and then and there's another one based off of the USS Indianapolis, which I actually did a video of that I think a year or two ago, and that also had a romance which ended sadly, and then it turned to a love triangle at one point, and it was it's yeah, we get it, whatever, you gotta have your romance, fine.
That trope can die, pun intended.
I mean,
I kind of have a teeny tiny bit of respect for it, because it's a case where the women are not going into the fridge. It's still a boring ass trope that woman is just there to cry over her man, but she's alive.
So further on in the movie, you have them land over at the base, and I love this little tidbit about the radio broadcast of Axis Mary, kind of negging all the soldiers, saying speaking of wives, all their wives cheating on them back home. That's actually a real historical thing, except it wasn't Axis Mary, it was Axis Sally, I believe it was. It was two former Americans. One was Mildred Gillers. She was a German American who went into Nazi Germany afterwards. The first woman ever tried for treason. It's interesting.
#girlboss ?
Yeah. But so
absolutely not. Never be a Nazi. Never.
No. For fascist Italy, you had Rita Zucca, who was an Italian American who defected from America. She renounced her citizenship and moved to Italy. And there's back and forth of whether or not she enjoyed being Axis Mary, or it was kind of forced upon her because she spoke fluent English. But because she renounced her citizenship, she couldn't be tried for treason. So she kind of lived till obscurity until 1993, where she passed away. But yes, Axis Mary, and the Japanese side, they had Tokyo Rose. Their job was to run these radio broadcasts that played today's big hits, and in between would be both insulting the American troops, as well as kind of hinting as oh, we know what troop is going out this and that when, oh, we know troop 114, you're coming out tomorrow into the front lines, we know where you are, anyway, here's Bing Crosby, and then they play and that the problem was that this,
1940s Bill Maher.
If
I don't
Bill
know.
Maher
I haven't
was
listened to radio in ages, so I don't know how this works. what the 21st century equivalent would be.
Like, imagine if ISIS ran a podcast talking about exercising and meat diets, and that I think that would be the modern day equivalent.
That
Oh my
sounds like
gosh.
Alex Jones bullshit.
I mean, like like that's what it was back in World War II. Is you had these radio broadcasts, and because they were the only ones that were playing like the big famous songs at the time that people would want to listen to, the soldiers more or less either laughed it off, being like, "Yeah, whatever, we know you're joking," or they just kind of like tolerate it in order to listen to music.
And why would you do that when you have a company that includes Leslie Odom Jr., Neo, and Method Man, and Elijah Kelly?
You don't need a radio when you've got Leslie Odom Jr. being in the room where it happens.
Leslie Odom Jr.
That was
didn't even sing, though, which
It was the
shocked me.
joke.
You have Leslie Odom Jr. in your movie, and you don't have him sing. He has such a nice voice.
Yeah, that was how I felt about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes audiobook. You have Santino Fontana narrating a book about music, and he's not singing. What is happening here?
Crazy casting, man.
And then I'm shocked that the role Bryan Cranston played did not go to Harrison Ford, because that seems like exactly the kind of role Harrison Ford would play in this sort of movie.
It did actually feel very Harrison Fordy. And Bryan Cranston, he like only had like what, one or two scenes.
He had like 3 scenes, and it all can be summed up as, I'm racist, but I'm going to mask it in my authority. But only just a little, because it's the 1940s and I'm still allowed to be racist openly.
Yeah, the racism, it's like my wife actually does not like this movie, I think in part because the racism is not realistic in the sense, like you have like the 1 or 2 scenes.
It did feel very tame.
Very tame.
Yeah, I wrote down that it felt very watered down, like it wasn't made to be palatable to the white audience.
Mm-hmm.
Like that scene when Lightning goes into the officers club and he punches one guy after they're mildly racist to him. I'm like, I feel like that would have ended in a murder ? Of
So
him?
there was a incident in England during World War II. England's bars and clubs were not segregated at the time. And so soldiers, both black and white, would go to the same clubs, and there would be constant back and forth bickering and racial slurs hurled at the black soldiers, to the point that there actually was a miniature armed conflict between, I believe, the military police and the black soldiers. This is a little bit later during the war when soldiers were in England. But yeah, like this, it would have been like a very big thing to have happened. It wouldn't have just been like one altercation and he would have been in the brig. It would have been like a big thing.
On a level, I get why it was kind of watered down, because if I'm not mistaken, this was like a PG-13 kind of movie, and, you know, in that respect, they are framing it as a very inspirational sort of thing. They want to have this be a thing that dads can bring their sons to see, because it's a very masculine targeted movie, let's be honest. I'm not saying you can't get anything out of it if you're femme in any way, but like, boy oh boy, is it a manly man's movie about being a man.
Hang on. Son, it is time that I pass down the tradition of watching World War II movies about battle with you. You too shall earn the legacy of watching the dad movie.
But Dad, I just want to learn about the Roman Empire.
It is too bad. You must watch the World War II movie. It is as your ancestors did, and their ancestors before them.
I'll never join you in the World War II movies.
It's over! The World War II movies have the high ground!
Oh, God. But no, that is kind of... The original trilogy are the World War II movies, and the prequels are the Roman Empire movies.
Oh my God, you're right, Sam, and you should say it.
And are you not entertained?
Oh, no. You get that Ridley Scott bullshit out of here. I'm not sure we've given quite enough attention, though, at this point, to... I'll call him Raygun, because that's what he wants to be called, but he spends a lot of the movie being called Junior. That was an
He was
interesting
adorable.
subplot. He was very cute.
I like Junior. I know he wanted to be called Raygun, but we just kept calling him Junior. He, to my knowledge, from what I could find, was actually based off of a single soldier of the Tuskegee Airmen, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Jefferson. The reason why I think he was based off of him was because early on, Junior talks about how he went to Howard University. Jefferson went there as well. He was also a POW at, like in the movie, except the camp was different. But the
Different German name that it's very difficult to pronounce.
Stalag Luft 18 was the movie. Number 3 was the actual camp he was in.
Bitte.
Yeah. And there was, we're jumping a little bit, but the escape scene in the movie, that actually happened at Stalag Luft 3, but it happened before Lieutenant Jefferson came there. Jefferson was eventually saved by Patton's troops later on in 1945.
Interesting.
The more you know.
In all likelihood, he was not received by the most not racist group of POWs ever to not racist.
So according to him, he talked about how he was treated actually pretty nicely and fairly, in part because he was an officer, and in part because they were all in war at a war camp. So at least according to him, he was treated pretty well. But I would say yes. When watching the movie, it's like that is right after they got accepted into the officers club, and it's like one after the other. It does feel like very like, are we trying to say it wasn't that bad, or they did the one thing and then suddenly racism is over? It's like that's not. No.
I don't think it's so much racism is over as much as it is we have acknowledged the racism as a thing, but now it has to take a backseat to the plot of doing the exceptional things.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way we can acknowledge the exceptional thing is by showing racist people not being racist now.
That is pretty much like the vibe I think the movie was going for, was that like
it's very much in that scene where the guys buy him a drink because he saved our asses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, but you're also just like, you're like, you can do that?
Yeah, there was if either of you have watched Late Night with Seth Meyers, back when the Connors show was rebooted and there was that episode where Roseanne was Islamophobic until their neighbors shared their Wi-Fi, Amber Ruffin did a little thing where she talked about how...
That's what's wrong with this episode. The minorities had to prove themselves to her. That's a dangerous mentality, and it isn't limited to Roseanne. The idea that people of color need to be told how to act by white people is becoming more pervasive in our society. It's a gross attitude that exists right now in Starbucks, in Nordstrom, and whenever I fly first class, which is every time that someone else pays for my ticket. And I can't figure out why. I just can't put my finger on it. Oh, yes, I can.
And it's kind of is that same feeling. I do want to acknowledge, in addition to Aaron Magruder, the other screenwriter on this, and the one who also has the story credit, is John Ridley, who later went on to win an Oscar for 12 Years a Slave. Also a black man. The director's black, Anthony Hemingway. So, like, clearly George Lucas, it's kind of like how nowadays Rick Riordan has his Rick Riordan Presents thing, where he'll spotlight authors of color and try to let them tell their own stories rather than appropriate those stories and tell them himself. Where, like, George was using his money and resources to try and boost up this story. In that respect, it's great, but it's also like this clear indication of just how much you gotta play the capitalism game. So if you want the quote-unquote most bankable demographic of white males 18 to 49 to come see your movie, you can't show that much racism in 2012.
I do agree in that. I would say also that since this is Lucas, he executive produced it, and you do have primarily Black people behind the camera and in front of the camera. I look at it as kind of like you are making a movie where you aren't being entirely super truthful. You want to make this fun action movie. You want to make the fun dad movie. And also, we've had a lot of those for white people. This movie feels very much like a World War II movie that you would find in the old times that George Lucas, watched all the old serials, all the old movies. You have the hotshot pilot, you have the stuffy old officer, you have the all is lost moment. Then you have like the stakes during the dogfights, and you have all this action beats and stuff. But you have that racial element in there, and you have the really really uplifting ending. And honestly, I look at that kind of the same way as like another World War II movie called Overlord. It was J.J. Abrams' company made this horror movie. That's about the closest you're going to get to a Wolfenstein movie, if any of you played that game or know of that game. And that movie is very, 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 very inaccurate because the soldiers are integrated and everyone's treated exactly the same. And I look at this movie as like a version of that, where if you're going to make your action fun World War II movie for Black people, you can do that, right? Like, you deserve to see yourself in that heroic, fun, beat the Nazis, rah rah type of movie.
Yeah, and there are moments when I think this movie really captures that kind of spirit. One of my favorite characters, honestly, is Deke, or Deacon, as he's sometimes called. He's the one who was going around with a little picture of Black Jesus, or historically
Black
accurate
Jesus.
I loved Black Jesus.
I love Black Jesus. I actually do love the incorporation of Christianity, because like my wife's taking me to Black churches. Black churches slap so differently than white churches. It is like I'm not preaching a sermon or nothing, but man, I like that is like, man, if I went to Black church as a kid, I would never have left the church, man. That is some energy. But I would say I looked it up to see like when did the idea of Black Jesus come into the zeitgeist, and the best I could find is that you have 1870s, 1890s, kind of like these weird little obscure things and essays and one mural in Rhode Island. But the idea of a Black Jesus didn't really come into foreplay until the Black Panther era. Like Martin Luther King talked about Black Jesus in the way that like Black people are very much in the realm of sacrificing themselves for the betterment of their own people. But he didn't actually say like, Jesus was Black. That was something very much during like Black Panther era. So seeing it in World War II is kind of like,
it's not necessarily anachronistic, but it's not common.
right, like it's possible that there would have been one soldier being like praying to Black Jesus, but the idea of like the entire unit having that idea of Jesus like that is historically inaccurate. But if you are an older Black man who was during the Panther era, seeing that would be very much like that feel good moment of like, hell yeah, Black Jesus, woo.
I could have happily had the entire movie be about Reagan and Deke and not even had the lightning and easy plot line, honestly. Like, and I don't know, part of me kind of feels like they didn't do quite enough with Michael B. Jordan's character, Maurice.
Yeah, I kind of forgot
Like,
he was in there half the time.
He dips
Quite literally
in
same.
at the start. Then he's gone for a really long time, and then he like comes in to replace Deke, and then he gets like unceremoniously killed off. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he survived the plane crash when he gets shot down in the final battle, but I doubt it.
Wait, is that the
plane doesn't have vibranium in it?
No, wait, I thought he got shot down during the one, I don't remember the title of it, but in the middle, where they couldn't get the projection seat open and they had to land it.
No, that was Deke.
Okay.
It's hard to tell when they all have the masks over their faces.
I'm doing my best. I'm face blind.
That being said, COVID is still a thing. Please be masking when you're going out in public.
Yeah,
I don't care if your phone can't recognize you.
I'm trying to go through my notes, and yeah, I got nothing on really Maurice as a character. You're right. Well, I guess
that's
like
Michael B. Jordan.
Well, he was this before or after Black Panther came out? Because I remember that
This
was like
was way before Black Panther.
Way
okay,
about like 10
I
years or
do
so, give or
think-
take.
Oh wow, okay.
I do think it was after. Oh nope, this was before Fruitvale Station. So this was technically before he really broke into movies. Like before this, his biggest thing would have been on Friday Night Lights. You know,
Man,
Okay.
that is a show that I have not watched because it is too close
but you
to
know,
home.
it is always funny to look back at these movies and be like, wow, that's future Oscar nominee Leslie Odom Jr.
That's future Tony Award winner Leslie Odom Jr. It is cool to see these people like before they were like huge household names.
Yeah, I
And
mean
it also
that's
it kind of makes you sad that like Elijah Kelly hasn't been in more stuff because he's still great.
He is great.
which one did he play in this movie?
He was Joker,
Joker.
the one who was like always playing cards.
Oh,
That's one of the drop. There are a lot of talented actors in this cast, but that means that a lot of talented actors are fighting to make an impression. And unfortunately, as is the case with many historical movies, if a person is played by an actor you already know, then you can recognize them more easily and they will leave more of an impression. Like part of the reason I haven't seen Oppenheimer is because I'm going to be like, yep, that sure is Robert Downey Jr. or Emily Blunt or Florence Pugh or Rami Malek or whoever else the fuck is in that movie.
I saw it in 70mm IMAX. Like, I'm biased.
I think it's funny.
I mean,
you
I
two
saw
saw
Killer of the Flower Moon and I see Brendan Fraser and I'm like, Brendan Fraser, what are you doing here?
I absolutely love that you two saw the current dad movie, the big dad movie of the year, and I still haven't.
Oh no, I
Who's the
haven't seen
dad
Oppenheimer.
now? You became the
I
thing you
have-
swore to destroy.
I have not seen Oppenheimer. I have categorically not seen it because I know that the actors are going to be distracting me too much for me to get into it. Also, I just don't have the bandwidth for 3 hours.
So the next big scene in the movie would be like Operation Shingle, the big like we need them to be proved.
That's the escorting the bombers part, or is that the bombing out the airfield?
That's, I believe, the same one. So Operation Shingle was the name given by Winston Churchill for the Battle of Anzio, which went from January to June of 1944, which is technically the time frame for this movie, even though you don't see one really speck of snow until like later on during the summer.
Yeah, you only see the snow when it's dramatically convenient for the escape thing.
Yeah.
Also, I want to just say, did they run out of budget for font? Because the fonts of the opening titles, including
those were bad.
Italy 1944, that's like, I think that was just Helvetica.
That very much gave off graphic design as my passion vibes.
We're just like, I can give you guys the font I used for a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but everything else in the budget has to go to the planes making explosions.
And
Planes
what
have to go boom,
explosions they
boom.
were. Hey,
They
I
were
like
good
them boom
explosions.
booms. They were very good explosions.
Yeah, very good aerial sequences.
Did they feel kind of Star Wars-y to you?
A little.
It does kind of feel like they were trying to recapture that, but I don't know. There wasn't the same like continuity of movement that like Marsha Lucas is really able to get down. No disrespect to these editors, Michael O'Halloran and V. Ben Burt, but like sometimes there are just times when you need Marsha.
I did
Marsha
get like
saves everything.
Marsha.
Sure, Jan.
I did get a couple like Star Wars vibes from a couple shots, and I think that's really just because this is the same like production company of the effects for Star Wars.
Yeah,
this is LMN.
This is the
right?
same production, everything for Star Wars. The same studio, same executive producer, same producer. Because Rick McCallum has also been in a ton of Star Wars and Lucasfilm projects.
And Lucas based the idea of the X-wing fighter scenes as part of like the dogfighting scenes he watched as a kid, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like kind of like it's a copy of a copy.
He's always trying to recapture.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
Time is a flat circle.
It's wibbly wobbly timey wimey.
Nope, wrong. Go into your corner. Go to your bigger on the inside corner. This is not a Doctor Who time.
You open the door.
So going back to the Operation Shingle scene, escorting bombers was the main mission of the Tuskegee Airmen, and I'm surprised that it wasn't put into the movie about how they never lost a bomber to enemy fire, not a single one in their entire time during the war.
Okay, so it wasn't 100% clear. We do see one bomber get shot, and they have to, like, escort it away.
Yeah, so I believe that is later on in the movie, and yes, they escort the bomber out of the way, which I really do like, because that does emphasize the point that, like, bomber planes were shot by enemy aircrafts, but they were escorted out, and they didn't lose one in the scene in the movie, because that is actually something that very much was true, is that while they lost bombers because of like mechanical issues or something, they've never lost one due to enemy aircrafts firing at them, because the Tuskegee Airmen, like, that's what they're known for, is that they stuck to the mission, and they didn't go off like lightning does. They stuck to it, and they kept all the bombers safe during the war.
And in that regard, it's like, lightning is fictional, so we do not have to adhere to historical accuracy.
Yes.
That is impressive, and it really does drive home that whole thing of being, in this instance, a Black person in a white environment. One must work twice as hard to get half the recognition. Like, honestly, it was gratifying to see them getting that presidential commendation at the end, but it's like, you could have gotten them more. They probably deserved more.
They did deserve
Not probably,
more.
they definitely did.
Like, I have a Presidential Unit Citation on my uniform, and I didn't do squat.
Oh my god. Are Presidential Unit Citations just participation trophies?
No. It's
Okay.
a recognition. It's a recognition of your unit. So while I personally haven't done anything to really warrant that kind of citation,
So it's the group project, and y'all just wow.
As the college kids who did all the work in the group projects, we see you.
Look. We got cited. We got the medal before I enlisted. Okay, like, they did some stuff before I came in. I just happened to tag along.
He doesn't even go here.
Today has been an eye-opening experience about how weird the U.S. Armed Forces are.
It's a very weird place. Like, because I'll tell them, it's so funny. When I tell Marines
I'm
that
sorry,
my dad,
Smith, we're ragging on you really hard. I'm sorry.
We don't mean to.
You guys, I'm sorry. This is nothing. This is nothing compared to what I like. I'm sorry. What would you say your dad was, a Marine?
No, my dad was a corpsman in the Navy. But when I tell Marines that my dad was in the Navy, they'll rag on him until I say he was a corpsman, and then they're like, "Oh nope, we're fine. He's cool. He can continue forward."
I mean, the other thing
they do the medical care.
The other thing you can tell them is that Marines have to listen to the Navy, because Marines are actually part of the Navy. If you call them Daddy Navy, then they really get.
Listen, the Marines just want to go shoot things, and the Navy gets them there.
Look, the Navies, they just want to eat their crayons, drink their glue.
No, that's the Marine. That's the Marines. The Marines eat the crayons. Ask a Marine what their favorite flavor crayon is.
Exactly. Yeah. They like purple.
You said the Navy, and I will not stand for this slander.
Okay. Well, you know what? God. When we listen to this afterwards, we'll find out.
Both of you assume I'm not going to cut a good chunk of this.
You don't cut a single thing.
It's over, Sam. We win the battle.
But going back to Operation Shingle, this was actually like a very, very big battle lasting about half a year. It was an American and English joint operation. I don't know if they intermingled with each other, but a couple like big name people who were involved in here would have been Roger Waters' dad. This was the battle that he died in, which spawned The Wall and everything from Pink Floyd. Ask your dads. And another one you guys might not know who took part in this was Christopher Lee. He was part of the Royal Air Force.
Oh, fuck yeah!
That's awesome. Yeah, there were some cool people who fought in World War II. There were some less cool people who did not fight in World War II. Looking at you, John fucking Wayne. Every time I learn something
about Christopher Lee, I'm more and more upset that George Lucas did not give him more to do as Count Dooku. Like, hang on a second.
There were a lot of celebrities who did fight in World War II, but it was really gross the number who didn't.
Yeah,
They
when
could
I
have given Christopher Lee a cameo in this movie.
oh yeah, he was still alive at this point. He could have, yeah.
He died in 2015. It could have worked. And apparently, they did have to do some reshoots on this, and Anthony Hemingway was not available, so George Lucas did the reshoots. George, why did you not call him up? George.
I mean, to be fair, he probably didn't want to ask Lee and potentially trigger some kind of PTSD because that man.
Yeah, very fair, very fair.
Mm,
I'm realizing now. It's probably for the best that the biggest name white guy in this is Bryan Cranston, so that way we can keep the focus on the black ensemble. That being said, they didn't really give Cuba Gooding Jr. a lot to do.
not really. And then when
Which is just offensive. Cuba Gooding Jr. should always be given more to do.
yeah, he was kind of in and out. He always had his pipe with him. That was pretty much like what he was known for.
Was he playing a real person or a fictionalized version of a real person?
No character in this movie is a real person. There are some people who are based on things, like Junior being based off of someone in particular, but I couldn't find anything for Cuba. But Benjamin O. Davis Jr. is probably Terrence Howard's character, Colonel Bullard. And Davis Jr. was one of the higher ranking officers. His dad was actually a general, the first black general. And like his story, Davis Sr., his story, belongs in its own movie, being the second black man in West Point, but was just treated just really, really harshly during that entire time. It just kept going up the ranks.
Was that the basis for the Jonathan Majors movie that now nobody wants to talk about, or was that somebody else? Because I remember seeing advertisements for that, but I can't.
That one. No, that's Korean War. That's after World War II.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, all the war movies, they blend together after a while.
That's what you have me here for.
Very fair, and we appreciate you, Smith.
Of course.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for yours. I
haven't served anything except Girl Scout cookies, so
you served this platform for me to speak. Therefore, thank you for your service. Yes. So, what else in here you guys want to bring up and talk about?
I felt like the pep talk speeches, like, they felt so fake. Like, it was very clearly, like, motivational, ignore the racism pep talk speech. Like, especially when Lightning died. Like, that one, I was just like, dude, he died. This is maybe not the time?
Really, the issue I had around the scene after Lightning's death was that we're having this big moment to commemorate him, but we don't really get to rest on it because then, bam, Ray Gun shows up and
he crashes a memorial.
We get to end on a happy note, and fun fact, that person who's driving the Jeep is actually a Tuskegee Airman. It's James D. Weston II. He was a member of the Tuskegee Airmen Bay Area chapter.
That's cool.
So, like, regiment that was the Tuskegee Airmen, the 332nd, they've been reactivated over and over throughout the years. I think 2014 was the last time they were activated. I don't know if they're still currently activated or not, but someone like that can like bring their lineage back to the Tuskegee Airmen as like a sense of pride.
That's dope.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was pretty great that like he just kind of crashed a memorial and then we have this whiplash of emotions like, wait, what? I thought we were having a moment here, but all right.
Yeah, and it also kind of bums you out because like that's after we've had the dramatic moment of, hi, I'm the white guy who was in the prison with Ray Gun. Here are his dog tags. He sacrificed himself for us. Joke's on you, suckers.
Surprise. Bet you thought you saw the last of me.
Get that Ryan Murphy bullshit out of my house. Also, I don't think we've had a chance to talk about Coffee. I was very fond of Coffee as a character.
He was a delight.
He is this delightful one-note character of, you boys stop putting holes in my planes!
Get off my lawn!
After he had that massive pissing contest going back and forth with Lightning. And then he's just like, no, my sparring buddy!
No!
The one thing I was kind of confused about Coffee was that, like, you see his jacket at one point, and his rank is pretty high. He's a first sergeant. And that kind of ranking, at least in like an infantry unit, that's something like he's pretty much in charge of like at least 100, 200 people. So him being like portrayed as like kind of this like the wisecracking mechanic, yeah, like he's in charge of like 200 wisecracking mechanics. So unless like he has that rank and is only trusted with these planes while the other mechanics do other aspects, like I was very, very confused on that. But I am not too familiar with airmen or the structure of World War II airmen at this point. So like I can't chalk that up as being like inaccurate or not.
It was just delightful for him to be like, you put holes in my plane.
There are some points when accuracy has to take a backseat to a good story.
And Coffee provided an excellent story.
Honestly, I think that's like how I feel about the whole movie. In the vein of like with historical movies, especially army movies, there's gonna be a lot of inaccuracies. Like in this one being like it's the middle of the summer, but there's snow falling on the ground. Or like events happening so close together and things are being omitted for both time and just in order to create like a story, you run the risk of like, are you making a historically accurate movie or are you making like an emotionally accurate movie? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. And,
Like,
in the famous words of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend,
life doesn't make narrative sense.
no.
Nope.
Like there's the scene in Saving Private Ryan, the Normandy scene that every mediocre high school history teacher shows all their kids, the Normandy landing. Like if I was like when I taught high school history for student teaching, I used that scene and I kind of try to explain how like there's a lot of inaccuracies here. Like the boat pilots should be British. The structures are backwards, and the machine guns cannot fire repeatedly like that. You run the risk of ruining your barrel and exploding the gun. But at the same time, when that movie was in theaters, you had D-Day veterans leaving the theater because they can literally start smelling the oil from the boats because their PTSD was going off. And it's that kind of thing where it's like, all right, you're not being historically accurate in your movie, but you are being emotionally authentic. And I feel like this movie is like almost there.
Maybe if they'd had like just a little more budget, because to be clear, George Lucas ended up investing $58 million into this project and another $35 million towards marketing. But like maybe if you'd given them a little bit more money, they could have had like a little bit more wiggle room. Honestly, the biggest thing that bugged me in terms of a historical accuracy thing was anytime they were like playing flight footage from Lightning's plane. One, it was always Lightning's plane, and two, it always seemed to be just the footage from the movie, but with like a sepia filter run over it.
Yeah, that was really.
It's like, where are you getting this editor?
If I think if I had a couple more days of research, I could have found out like how footage was captured at this time period, or if they were using it as training footage. That was something I was like, huh, did they really do that? And I couldn't really find anything out on that. So I can't chalk that up to historical accuracy or not.
So I did some nerd calculation numbers here. $53 million in 2012 equals $72 million in 2024.
That's a pretty mid-budget movie, honestly.
Yeah, it's still a really low budget.
For this kind of movie, it's very low.
Yeah.
And in spite of that, it still looks like a very good movie from a technical standpoint. The visual effects have not aged poorly. The filmmaking techniques are not bad.
I don't think a budget issue is really the thing. I think similar to the actual Tuskegee Airmen is that they were fighting war on both fronts of fighting, they're fighting the Germans, but they're also fighting against racism back home. This movie is both trying to be historically, emotionally authentic to the story of these soldiers going above and beyond for just a little bit of recognition, but at the same time they wanted to be like the fun, action-packed blockbuster war movie, and it's trying to be both, and it to me doesn't really get there on both ends.
This was the last movie that Lucasfilm did before Disney bought it. And in that regard, I'm kind of bummed because we're only like 2 episodes removed from Willow, and it would have been nice to see a path where Lucasfilm got to diversify its portfolio away from Star Wars and Indiana Jones and done more stuff like this. Like, it could have been this cool pulp fiction action adventure studio that did this kind of thing continuously. But, you know, the world broke George Lucas by being bitches about his
everything.
about his passion project prequel trilogy, and he gave up.
Like, Disney doesn't care about this movie so much that when you play it on Disney Plus, it still has the 20th Century Fox logo.
Disney does that for a lot of... I'm pretty sure Star Wars still has the 20th Century Fox logo when you play it on Disney Plus.
That's interesting.
Wow. Really?
Disney just does not take the 20th Century Fox logo out of stuff. They don't have to, because they own 20th Century Fox now.
So I guess that's probably why, because it's still their property.
Honestly, it'd be weirder if Disney ended up like buying Warner Brothers or something and you still have the Warner Brothers logo and everything. But I think the time has come.
Is it landing into the Force, and is it with them, Sam?
Ooh.
You two tell me.
Callie, go first. I don't want to go first.
I would say yes. It gets the spirit of what it's trying to do right. Even if it fumbles it at a lot of places, it's still a good movie. I had a good time. And I learned something.
I'm going to say a light yes, because there were a couple moments I really wish they mentioned. Like, they had text boxes. They could have said, you know, the Tuskegee Airmen did not lose a single bomber, which is true, and would have been a nice like note to end on, as opposed to just unit citation. But overall, like, action was fun. The characters I really liked. You know, I teared up when, you know, Lightning died, and I had a good time.
I think I will also give it a yes. I will take us all into the dark side of Sith stealing and absolutes and say yes. I think that it's a very kidified narrative, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because if there's one thing we've seen, especially over the past couple of years, kids need to learn this stuff, and if there's a movie that's accessible and eases them into it without bagging it down with too much historical fact, you know, maybe that inspires them to go out and learn more about it. And I don't want to say that it's like inspiration porn or anything, but this is a cool story that deserves more attention. So I'm glad it's out there, and while there are things that I wish could be changed about it, I enjoyed watching it. I will probably send a message to my little brother after this being like, have you watched this movie? You should watch this movie. You will really like it, I think, because there are planes in it.
And now it is time for the dice to take their landing descent into finding out what degree...
No, Pluggables first.
Pluggables, then degrees, okay. Here in the near future, we will be publishing the podcast Postcards from Mystic Falls, where 4 experts drag a neophyte they claim to care about into the Vampire Diaries cult, spanning all 3 shows with Sam as our lovely neophyte.
Please save me.
So I'm CB Smith. I run a YouTube channel with that name. We talk about books and adaptations, and of course, as you guys can figure out from this whole podcast, history behind them. I'm currently working on a very, very big episode on Dungeons and Dragons, both the 2000 movie and the old Mazes and Monsters anti-D&D movie, ending in the Satanic Panic. What was it, and what exactly was the outcome of it? So check that out when it comes out.
As for me, I will ask that you keep the spirit of Star Wars alive by supporting artists through the Entertainment Community Fund, and by taking action to support anti-imperial and anti-colonial movements across the globe, partially by using links provided below, and by taking action in your community. And you can find me on the wider internet as La Femme Fictionale, including on YouTube, Twitter, and Tumblr, where you can also find the blog for this show. Our theme music is provided by Refractory Period, the 2 girls' one-beat synth-pop sensation. You can follow them on Instagram at Refractory Period the band. To further support this podcast, please subscribe to us on your platform of choice, leave reviews, consider joining Patreon, and share with your friends to boost our visibility. And now it's time to turn to the Chance Cube to decide where our journey takes us next.
4. That is a degree 4.
4.
It is a 4. So, in honor of our Women's History Month, our first 4 is going to be A Wrinkle in Time by Ava DuVernay. Awesome. All right, well, we will see you all next time for A Wrinkle in Time. Until then, Stay safe, stay strong, stay beautiful, and may the Force be with you.